One thing that I've never really had much success with is trying to match the sun. It's never quite felt right to me. Knowing that we were in Arrakis, we had a bit of a hunch that if we joined enough vortexes together, we were able to kind of create something that was equivalent to a soft sun, or even more powerful than a soft sun. We put 64 Vortex 8s together, which we called the Vortex 512, because it had 512 pixels. We used the cream source LNX system, created a monster of a light, which was game-changing for us.
My name is Eric Koritz. I'm a cinematographer. I'm most known for Ozark, Special Ops Lioness, and soon-to-be upcoming show Ransom Canyon on Netflix. That's that. As a cinematographer, to me, light is everything. Sculpting light to me is how I tell a story. Profoto as a brand is known for their quality of light. To me, it's exciting to be able to bring that into the cinema world. Using the L1600D on set makes my job easier and faster. Without a ballast, you can rig it in ways that other lights can't be rigged. What delicate work. It's much more versatile than a 1.8K HMI. It's small, you can plug it into a wall, and it's more powerful and more energy efficient. They have over 50 modifiers, but there's also a Bowens mount, so you can do an infinite amount of third-party modifiers. I feel like this light will change the way we work. What I love most about the L1600D is the power of the light, the quality of the light, which is beautiful. And then when you couple that with their cinema ecosystem of modifiers that you can make it an incredibly versatile light, it really brings out the best in an LED light.
All right, and with that, the lights come up and it's time for the panel. Thank you everybody for joining. We're here to talk with a fine group of people about the cross-section of technologies that are influencing and enabling cinematography these days. If you guys want to find out more about what we're doing about that at Cooke Optics, please come by our booth, 443. We've got plenty we can talk about there, but we're not going to talk about that here. So today we've got a fine panel for you. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but I'm Jordan Thistlewood, the Managing Director of Cooke Digital.
Hi, I'm David Procter. I'm a cinematographer shooting film, TV drama, commercials. My background was in documentary originally, and then I moved into commercials, and then finally into drama. So it's been an amazing journey.
Cool. I'm Ashley Barron, ACS. I'm a cinematographer, mostly shooting television drama at the moment. I started shooting commercials in Australia before making my way over here in 2018, where I shot commercials and music videos for about a year before transitioning into series work.
Excellent.
My name is Victor Perez. I'm a visual effects supervisor, currently working at Marvel Studios. So as a visual effects supervisor, my job is to destroy your work as cinematographers. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Purvis. I'm the CEO of Mission Digital and the Origami platform. I'm a former DIT. Our company provides digital workflow services all the way through from the point of capture through to delivery to VFX. And I also sort of came through the camera department, so I boast that I'm one of the few managing directors that run a company like this that can lace up an ARRI 435.
Hi, I'm Tamas Papp. I'm a DP/virtual pipeline technician and started to work with Greg Fraser on Doom Part 2.
All right, so we got a great panel. And I think you'll see by the end that Victor does not destroy your images. He actually helps make them better. All right, so for today, we're going to go through kind of a linear chronological flow, starting with the visualization and planning discussion, going through DIT to post, and then finishing off with the overlap of visual effects in cinematography. All right, so first up, we'll have Tamas talking about his work on Dune 2.
So as you can see, this is the Harkonnen attack scene, Harkonnen Harvester attack scene. This scene we did in 2 locations. We did it in Abu Dhabi and in Budapest. Some parts of it we did in Budapest, and some parts we did it in Abu Dhabi, and there was 3-4 months in between the two. We did first, so this whole scene is taken. So it consists of like basically 3 parts. One part where they come out of the sand, the Fremen, then they walk, they run on one side of the Harkonnen harvester, and then they fight a little bit, and then they go under the harvester, and then they come out on the other side, do a little bit of fight there as well, and then leave the harvester, and it blows up. So everything that was before they get under the harvester, and everything that was after they get out of the harvester, they have shot in Abu Dhabi in November. And everything that was getting under the harvester, being under the harvester and coming out, was being shot in Budapest in August. So the main challenge we had is we had to make sure that the size of the shadow of the harvester was correct. The other thing we had to make sure is as they run first on one side, it's fully in shadow, and when they get out on the other side, it's fully lit. So what we had to make sure is everything was correct across Abu Dhabi and Budapest, and we also had to make sure that in Abu Dhabi in November that we come up with the right way, the right method to build a shadow system like out of 40 by 40s and 20 by 20s, so that we can create the biggest shadow in the middle of desert that's possible. So that's what you can see here. So basically, the Jamie Mills, the gaffer, they told me what we're going to have, and then they just asked me to play around with everything we had, basically, and figure out what makes the most sense shape-wise and what we get with what we have. So Greg was able to see, and Jamie was able to see in the middle of summer what we're going to do in November, and they were able to plan accordingly.
And I think you said previously that the goal of this was really that Greg wanted to use sunlight for sunlight, and so trying to match between 2 locations 2 times a year.
Yeah, so it's all, I think a really big benefit is you can just play around with all these ideas. You can play around with what you're going to have, and it's more of a play and less of a stress on the day. So even in here, how you can see like the shadow that the harvester would create is, obviously you can't create that big of a shadow, but you can create something that's big enough.
Then the partnership with visual effects helps take over and fill it out and things like that.
Yeah, although I was not included in that part, but visual effects was aware of what Greg wanted to do. So there was a constant communication in between the visual effects and us and Greg, and like everyone was connected.
Very cool. And so you were also like a hub for even like the stunt performance team as well.
Yes. So basically, once we put something together, I've just put in some of the storyboard shots in here with the characters and the cameras, and then the stunt supervisor was able to come in. He was able to plan how they're going to do, not in this one, because this one didn't have that much stunt stuff that they needed TechVis for, but there were some other locations where we calculated where to put the crane, because there are some of these shots where they fly up on the rocks. So for that, they wanted to do that in camera. So for that scene, we had like a lot of different locations that we used for that one scene that played as one location. And we had to figure out like how can everyone achieve, with the help of Unreal, the perfect of their tasks. So Unreal was really useful for that, because then once Greg put down the cameras, once he told me how he would like to have the camera to face which direction, then stunts were able to come in, they were able to put the crane in, they were able to put the wires in, then I could show that to the ADs, then the ADs knew what's going to happen, and especially with Abu Dhabi and Jordan, it was really important so that everyone is on the same page, because these are very remote locations, so if you can bring any visual ideas and visual help in advance, that's really helpful.
Very cool. And David, you've done a lot of different types of projects, from LED stages, music videos, commercials, features, documentary. You've also sort of made different uses of different levels of technology for the same purpose of planning and figuring it out so it all goes well on the day. Do you want to maybe take us through this first commercial then?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a car commercial shot in Vancouver, and the concept was that the design lines of the car would be projected around the car and the environment. And sorry, it's very dark and it's quite bright in here. But the idea was that we did it practically. So rather than using visual effects, we did this with actual projections. So we had multiple Christie 4K cinema projectors, and we built a custom tracking vehicle so that we could actually track these projectors that were stabilized, and we could actually project on the move. Which, of course, by the time you've got a picture car, you've got a U-crane, you've got another vehicle we used for lighting, because, of course, when you're trying to project onto environment, you need as little light as possible. So in Vancouver, we had to sort of knock off swathes of street light in blocks of the city to allow for the projection to work, which, of course, then means your car is looking very dark. And they didn't want an Audi-style spot. They wanted something that was the car looking a little bit more studio-lit, so to speak. So what we used Cinema 4D to actually plan how and where we could locate projections and projectors, the lensing we would need, the kerning and the manipulation we'd need on those projectors, and also the way that so we were able to do it without having shadows from vehicles, and the actual blocking. It's almost like the blocking of the staging of the machinery we needed to actually achieve this. So that was kind of the only way we were able to make that work. And sometimes we were tiering multiple projectors together to create larger surfaces. And this is just taking me back to, the crude ways of doing things. Like, this is something you'd be able to do beautifully in Unreal Engine now, is take the picture car, put it into a space, look at the way that the animations and light work around it as a reflective object. But here, we didn't have that. So this is literally a toy car sat on my laptop with the screen behind it playing the animations as a kind of a proof of concept as we were in prep of the way that the different animations would work and flow around the bodywork of the car, the heights and angles that would achieve the best sort of interaction with the vehicle. So there's kind of like a marriage of like lo-fi technology and modern technology there. And I think ultimately Previs is just a way of communicating a concept, communicating a way of achieving something. And there's many tools and ways of doing that now. And I think we're in a beautiful place where there's just such great technology there at our fingertips, like we were just seeing with Dune 2 there. The ways that, the difficulties of doing that stuff on location with a compass and looking at the sky and, sun tracking and paths and, times are changing. So, yeah, it was a fun one.
All right, and so then this was sort of one of the things where you were setting up the projections.
That's right, yeah, so this is in the tunnel. So just trying to work out where the car could be, where the width of the road, the lensing, the way they want the car shot. Of course, with car commercials, there's always heights and angles documents from manufacturers of how they like the car to look, where they like the lens to be. And it's just having those things in mind, as well as the physicality of how we're actually going to achieve it. This kind of shows some of the tools we were using. It looks pretty mad, actually, looking back at it. But of course, we were projecting on both sides. We were projecting behind the vehicle, but also in front of the vehicle, so there's reflections within the windows and the bodywork of the car as well. So it was like how we place those projectors, where they go, how it fits in that very tight space.
And what do you think, in terms of the planning, how did that, the planning versus the execution work out? Because it must have been a very high-stress shoot for you.
Yeah, it worked very well. I mean, there were some locations where there ended up being problems with light spill from distant sources that we couldn't get access to. That obviously those light sources are never on when you tech scout. That's the rule of what we do, isn't it? So you've done the best planning you can, but then you're caught out. This location was beautiful because in Vancouver it rains almost every day. So this was a blessing being in the dry. Yeah.
All right, then you get this other one that you took a different approach.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because it's a one-shot, and well, from about now. And this was kind of one of those things where I worked very closely with the VFX supervisor, Jim Radford, to work out how to actually achieve this as a oneer. So we shot this at New Bojana Studios in Bulgaria. And using previs was integral because when you do oneers, within narrative, you've got some leeway in the time that maybe sections take and the way it builds together. Whereas with commercials, you generally got a very strict deliverable for media buyouts globally. So this had to be 60 seconds long. So though previs became more than a storyboard, it became an exact time, locked time of each piece of the puzzle. There's 4 shots in here. It kind of, hopefully, one of the cuts is very obvious. The other 2, I don't think you'd see. But we had to then work out how to achieve it, how we'd light it, how it would all come together. So the previs was not only useful in terms of the problem-solving side, but also it was very good and illustrative to show all departments what would and wouldn't be seen in camera, and the timing for the editors, because you can do a little bit of speed ramping, but very, very little, to be honest. So without that previs, which was a mixture of Cinema 4D as well as actually getting in situ with cameras and running and like lo-fi on a camcorder kind of thing, just running around and getting the piecing it together. So on the shoot day, you knew that a section had to be 12 seconds and 13 frames long, and if it was longer, it wouldn't cut. So kind of, again, a fusion of technologies. But I don't think we've got time to dive into the actual previs stuff. But, yeah.
No, we could go a couple hours. All right. So then moving on, Mark, DIT and post. DIT has become a critical role in digital production.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd just start with sort of my journey on that and where it started. That came from just shooting stills on 35mm film, and then started manipulating images digitally about sort of mid-2000s. And then I had an epiphany when I was playing around with Lightroom and realized that basically all the images that I was manipulating was non-destructive. And I thought, that just changes the whole game. And I sort of thought, oh, well, I want to do this for the rest of my life, and I want to do this with motion picture. And then, fast forward, the Red came out, and we had this, all of a sudden, the ability to manipulate images in a non-destructive workflow. And I started realizing that a lot of this was driven by metadata. And what we'd all started to take for granted was handwritten notes, like what you'd see in these Polaroid pictures behind me, where someone writes the location and the date, and that was just information. Well, that was invaluable metadata back then, and now we have that as digital files. And once you've got that embedded in the digital file, it really changes the way that you're able to work. So fast forward to where we are in 2025, and the nature of the industry is now that, firstly, things don't run in parallel, in linear fashion like they used to, where it used to go from production into post, into visual effects, and back into post, or editorial into visual effects and into post. But things are all happening in parallel at the moment, and effectively you're working with a global footprint where you might have production in London, post-production in Los Angeles, and VFX spread across Vancouver, Adelaide, Mumbai, and all these things need to be orchestrated in such a way that everybody's able to understand the creative intent at the point of capture and know what's going to be intended at the final output. So really what our job has become is to almost orchestrate that workflow and make sure that everybody understands what the cinematographer's intent was, and then how to build upon that now and how to expedite that process so that we're able to use technology to take resources away from laborious tasks that are repeated over and over again, automate that with the objective that you can make productions, you can allocate the resources into areas that will benefit the production more than just I suppose manual, processes that can be automated.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, in that sense, the DIT role has become so much more expanded because there's so much more information that's available on set, captured on set, needs to be, passed through down the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly as jobs get more complex, the weight of the DIT responsibility gets a lot more recognition. I think that it's not too uncommon for us to hear people come out of film school and say, oh, I'm going to become a DIT, and realize that they don't understand anything about storage or the complexity of color science, and that's a whole sort of just like a whole different ball game. And honestly, you speak to every visual effects supervisor, I'm sure you had this. This is the way I understand things simply, but if you've ever printed out a document on your printer at home and looked at it and realized it looks nothing like on the screen, you've got a color calibration misalignment. Now, if you've got VFX artists working in Mumbai that have no connection with the cinematographer, and that printout looks completely different to what was intended at the point of capture, when those get into post-production, you're having to effectively crowbar that back into a place, and that compromises the final outcome. The ideal scenario is everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet and knows exactly what that image was intended to look like and have a fair representation through that whole process. And that starts with the DIT communicating that all the way through.
So Ashley and David, then for you, what has been sort of the best thing about the DIT relationship, and what is the part that, where do you hope it goes? What's your aspiration for the future in terms of where it could have been better, or, how can DIT support you now and better in the future?
I think it's about also the DIT being supported by production so that they can actually do their job for you. I've had wonderful experiences with DITs where I have a live grade and everything on set, and the benefit of that, where you can, it's so important to have it because they're the language to show your director this is what it's going to look like, or everyone's able to see and equally keep you at such the pace that you have to work at television, and multiple cameras and all the rest of it, and have it all seamlessly together. It not only helps the workflow, but it helps you in terms of your management with the execs and the director and whatnot. But I have had experiences where I have a great data manager, a DIT, obviously not the same thing, but sometimes a data manager is sort of called a DIT, or they have to do multiple things on the one set, and they don't get the pre-production time to actually be able to be the support for you. So it's actually on us as well to try to be their support to make sure they get that, so they can be your support back, if that makes sense.
Perfect sense.
Yeah, I think it's all about communication and consistency. I'm a big advocate for designing lookup tables with the colorist and the DIT in prep, and ensuring that image that you're then looking at on set, whether you're with a live grade or not, like if you're just using a lot, making sure that that's consistent and that's what everybody's looking at from the capture on set through to the offline, and making sure whether you're in long form on drama or in commercials, is that's what's being seen. And I think that communication is very important, and you want to make sure that when a colorist starts grading, that becomes the start point, that's not thrown out and we're starting from scratch. Like, what are we going to do here? It's like there's a reason that lookup table has been designed and used, and I think always as a DP, I think if you can make sure you have that communication with a colorist, then that feels collaborative. They're not suddenly being given this recipe that they've got to manipulate and work from, because you want to feel that everyone wants to feel that they're bringing something to the table, and I think that communication is key there, to not just say, no, use this, you have to use this as the base, here's the 3D cube, that's what I want you to start with. And it's just consistency, because people get used to seeing images in that way, and you just want to have that consistency, that's the word.
Okay, and I think that's a great segue to the next thing. So Mark, there's an evolution in the digital lab and what technology is available for that explicit purpose of being able to pass the right information down the pipe to the right people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm fortunate to work with a fantastic business partner that has an incredibly visionary technological mind, and we shared a shared belief that going from film to digital was only half of it, but where things start to really become interesting is when you can start leveraging a centralized intelligence platform like the cloud, and to start automating all of these processes. And we started about 5 years ago building what we call the origami platform. And really what it's designed to do is to break down the silos between between production, editorial, visual effects, and post-production. And what leveraging metadata is key to what we're trying to do, or what we've built. We've now got it working around the world. It effectively allows editorial to make decisions and for it to communicate between visual effects and post-production, and effectively taking tasks that could take 48 hours to turn around and require human intervention into a seamless process that almost becomes invisible and ensures that all the metadata that you want to get from point A to point B, C, D, E, and F all gets there in a single package, so that people aren't sort of having to pull out data out of a FileMaker Pro database or search for it in disparate locations.
Yeah, and I think Victor, Ashley, and David, then you've all had experiences like, Victor, you're on the receiving end where metadata is just your, it's your oxygen. Both of you have had sort of experiences with shows where, it's hard to see, the exact follow through from the on-set discussions. So, it seems like, there's this newer way of working is, hopefully going to bring some solutions to those problems.
Yeah, I think that just on that note though as well, and I think that quite often when you talk about metadata, it gets lost on cinematographers to an extent. But, the end goal is, at the end of the day, making films is expensive. And resources might, considerable resources do go into visual effects. But let's just say that you had 1,000 VFX shots and each one of them takes 10 days to do. Well, if you could find ways of automating processes where you take, 2 days off the compositing and a day off the rotoscoping, and all of a sudden that 10 days, 1,000 shots at 10 days has now become 1,000 shots at 7 days. You've just had 30% saving on, a considerable line in the budget. And you should reallocate those resources into time with the actors and the director on production. I think someone once said to me, you could walk around this hall and there's all this great equipment, but they'll trade it all for more time with the director and the actors. And that, for me, is the challenge that I want to try and support, is how do you give, more time on production and less time, guessing distortion mapping.
And also more time on achieving what you need in post as well. So rather than spending time on minutiae, you could actually be using it to develop the story or to evolve it. You actually apply it to something kind of more integral in some ways rather than kind of the nitty-gritty, leaving more space for artistry, I suppose.
Yeah, it's about preserving the artistic vision, and data serves that. Because when you are guessing, every time you are guessing, you are inventing something that wasn't there. So the thing is the more you are missing, the more you are covering holes with your own ideas, not with the ideas that originally were developed, up to a point that what you see on the screen at the end has very little to do with what was planned to be. And that is where the frustration comes. That is why I said destroying the movies. Because, it's all about having part of the conversation, the visual effects. Sometimes there are films that are visual effects driven, for instance, and those must be in collaboration with visual effects. So it's not that, the common thing is most people think that visual effects is something of post-production, and it's not. Visual effects are designed in pre-production. If you don't have account of that, it's going to end like a different animal that you don't recognize at the end. So that's why it's very important to have everybody on the same page. And I, as a visual effects supervisor, I am a bit the catalyst of all the ideas and everything. And the most beautiful part of my job is that when it's well done, nobody notices. So my job is only noticed when it's badly done. Right. So it's when someone is, that is visual effects. But the most beautiful thing is a trend that is a bit creepy, but there is a trend like filmmakers are saying, no, everything in my movie is all for real. Oh, really? Good. That means it's so well done that they can be proud about, it's magic. Harry Potter is for real. Yeah. Of course.
All right. So I think this is a great segue.
Yes, segue into.
Well, I think first off, if you guys want to know more about the origami platform, Mark, where can they go see it?
At 30. So what's it called? Stand 30. It's on global distribution stand. So if you want to learn more, you can go and see it there.
So I know metadata is not a really sort of sexy creative topic, but it is really the distillation of everything that you as cinematographers and the camera team are creating on set, and it's the way that you facilitate people like Victor giving you their best results. But actually, let's carry on into your examples.
Well, yeah, it's actually an interesting segue because this is so I shot Doctor Who last year and a Netflix show last year that neither of which I can show yet because I'm heavily NDA. They haven't been released yet, but I really wish I could because we talked a lot about like that idea of having everyone on the same page in pre-production. Especially when you're, building sets, and like we actually use previs with VR glasses. I'm allowed to talk about that, But so for me, it's interesting because I showed Dangerous Liaisons here, which I shot now 4 years ago, I want to say, and it's interesting because like that's the Stars Lionsgate show, and it's the same thing that like this is a green screen back there, and I didn't know what was going to go back there when we shot it, and that I have to say has been not the exception to the rule. And there's some VFX back there that's, you can tell us, and it's a lot of stuff that, was added after the fact. And it's one of those things that, like, I'm repeatedly having to actively as a DP try to get as involved as I can because I'm finding that no matter how big or small the show is, this happens a lot where you actually don't and you have to just fight for those conversations in between art department, VFX, cinematography as well. So that was just an example of how you so often have to light for things that you've no idea what the design for what you're lighting.
And there's also just a range of experiences within the visual effects team, the specialties, the training that they come to the desk with, what sensibilities that they have, and how basically. How would they understand what you were trying to achieve based on the limited information that they have?
Yes.
And as Victor was saying, they try and fill in the gaps, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
And I suppose that, there's also the case that no matter how big the show is, there's never enough money, and sometimes you don't know what is happening behind on their side of things, what kind of budgets are being cut. We were very much I've been in those meetings where you're literally, this is your VFX shot allowance for this scene. This is your, because it's all about the budget at the end.
This is how often you can point at the window because we have to put something outside
and
the
you
window.
can't move the camera. Don't you dare. So it's
It's the classic.
Yeah, that's
Well,
that's a different
problem that
budget
should be
range.
talked about. Yeah. All right.
But this is actually an example, if I may, that where even when you have conversations in pre-production, it doesn't work out the way that you intended it to, and it informs your process. And I'm still crafting the approach to this because sometimes it just happens to you. This is a period piece, so a lot of candles, and a lot of locations that we shot in weren't allowed to use real candles. Also, we had people dancing with very flammable costume and hair. So I had to actually end up using bulbs, electric candles, essentially. And the idea was that VFX were going to shape it and do their own thing with it later. And so for me, I was given all these lists of you can't have them at a certain brightness because we won't be able to do anything with the outline. And as a result, the first scene was both of these scenes are lit with electric candles above them. But the thing that frustrated me the most was that this scene in particular, I had to inform, my whole lighting approach was informed based on that I couldn't use the chandeliers as this source of light. So I actually had to bring in balloons in the ceiling and the whole grade thing, I had to do a lot that it essentially changed because VFX didn't end up doing what we'd agreed would be done. It didn't look ultimately how we had set it out to look. This won an award at the ACS, so I'm not going to complain too much, but it's just that, it really was a thing that, as a cinematographer, even when they don't include you in the conversations in post, that you have to really stick yourself into them because, although I say that more about, I suppose, the first example, because for this, it was already done, that approach. It was captured this way. And so you kind of at the end go, well, we have to make the best of what was rendered. And I think most people when watching it wouldn't be like, wait, that bulb is candle's a bit brighter than it should be. But that was a real, I'll always look at it and be frustrated because it could have been something else. But,
and I guess this is really where the cinematographer, visual effects supervisor relationship, trust, ongoing, phone calls behind the scenes to basically go, okay, look, this is our challenge, this is the budget, we've got to make these choices, how can I make you happy?
Yeah.
And Victor, I know you sort of specialize in saying yes, but,
Oh yeah, yeah. That is the big part of the job is the yes, but,
Yeah.
and every time I say but, a faded dies. Yeah.
All right, so then let's roll on to your examples from your last project, Victor.
Yeah, this is from Naples, New York. This film has not been released in the UK yet. It's coming this summer, I think. I like this project. It's not a big project. What I love about this is it's a project that was written in 1948 by Federico Fellini. It was lost and then retrieved. Amazing story. But the thing is like, we needed to recreate New York in 1949 in the idea of what Fellini thought it was New York, because he was never in New York before. So I did a lot of research, and for me, the most important part of what was everything in the film about the visual effects was something that usually is not very mentioned in the environment, which is aesthetics. It's all about aesthetics. So I know that the cinematographer was working so hard to get a style that is going to look like the Wizard of Oz. So I needed to integrate that into how the visual effects are going to act for the movie. So it was to look like that. The first thing that came to my mind is like, okay, this is going to be like between neorealism and the golden age of Hollywood. So we need to build something in there. And for me, that I'm coming, I studied to be a cinematographer, but apparently I wasn't not that good. So I ended in the dark side of the filmmaking. But I love film, like film stock, and I love lenses. And we were using the exact same set of lenses that Vittorio Storaro was using for shooting Apocalypse Now. Those lenses were custom built for him, and we were using that. So for another project, I was using those lenses, and I said, oh, I need to get that look. So it took me a huge amount of work for nobody to notice. Mm-hmm. And that is lovely, because there are full shots, full CGI shots in there that nobody noticed that they are completely, artificial. There is nothing that was for real. But that is not something that I did and I can take credit alone, because it was the result of many conversations, because I'm a very good friend with the director of photography, with Italo, that at the end, he couldn't do the film because he got sick 2 days before shooting, of course, because it's the best time to get sick. So he couldn't just shoot in there. So the new cinematographer was like an amazing, Diego was really amazing, because he was like, I have no idea what you guys have in mind, but I'm going to execute whatever you have in there. So I have the ability just to, and he has also the ability to listen to me, famous last words, and just to work together. And I was like, okay, let's do it this way, because I'm going to need light in there. And he was like working for me as much as I working for him. So at the end, when he saw the film, the thing is like, he said, wow, it should like, I shot everything in there. And I know that it was like half of the things that are on the movie, because there are 536 shots in the movie. They were like blue screens with minimal things. And so it was just a question of approach. And I was very happy, because the technical chain, starting with the DITs, that is a figure that most people don't understand, and it's like as important as air. If you don't know how important is air, try to hold your breath, and you will understand. And the DIT is something that if it's missing, you're going to notice very, very quickly. So the thing is like, I got metadata that was helping. I was interpreting the metadata, creating plugins, and making a lot of things in order to guess as less as possible. Because at the end, it's all about art, but the art needs to be directed. If you don't have the ability to direct the art, it's like AI. You put a prompt in
that's
there,
a hot button topic.
and it's like, poof, something happens. You don't know, you cannot control, but something happened. That is not cinema. Cinema is like, I want that because of this reason. Whatever is the reason, but that is the vision of the director. So that is why I believe it's all about the cheapest thing. conversations. That is what makes cinema great, conversation. I mean, if you add beers, you have a lot of conversations.
So Victor, I think we're almost out of time.
Sounds like a cute.
What is I think the biggest takeaway you would like, a crowd full of camera, lighting, and cinematography people to take away in terms of how to succeed when working with visual effects? Other than obviously conversations, but.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is to really to keep into account that if you can shoot it for real, do it for real. It's going to be way more efficient, way more cost efficient. But as soon as you cannot shoot it for real for the reasons that can be, try to include the person that is going to take care of all of that, because usually it's a big part of the budget and an important part that is going to be defined at the moment of the shooting, but it's going to be executed later and needs to be planned before. So just keep that as a part of the conversation. Visual effects are a creative part that needs to be included in everything you see and you cannot see. So it's just to treat visual effects as what it is, a tool for storytelling.
And with that, I'm afraid we don't have time for question and answer, but I think you could probably find us outside the hall if you guys did have questions. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you to the panelists.